how far into the future is this woman and her associated works going to keep coming on my radar?
Always.
Yeah, that tracks. I've been on record in the past as saying I don't intend to talk about Harry Potter in the future. However, I've perjured myself on that a little bit before in that J.K. Rowling has come up again in topics that I felt the need to discuss. And in this case, I'm perjuring myself ever so slightly. I should probably clarify my position on that. I will not ever be simply reviewing a piece of Harry Potter associated anything. Not the future movies, not this game, which I'll be talking about. And let's also be clear, I'm never going to buy this game. And not just for the fact that I don't want to in any way contribute to J.K. Rowling's either wealth or popular culture footprint, but the fact that I don't have a RAID capable of running current games, and I just kind of don't care that much. Anyways, Hogwarts Legacy. Some interesting things have sort of happened and come out, enough that the wheels have gotten rolling in my head again, and, well, here we are. So, if you are not up to speed, there is currently in the works a AAA Harry Potter game called Hogwarts Legacy, which is being developed by a company called Avalanche and is going to be released by Warner Brothers Interactive. Warner Brothers is a fairly large name in the gaming industry. They hold the Arkham Batman games. They hold Mortal Kombat. They hold the Shadow of Mordor franchise. Now Shadow of War was their sequel. So, like, they're not tiny players. They're pretty big, and they seem to be putting a heck of a lot more effort into this than really any previous Harry Potter related video game items. I mean, the video games that were coming out in conjunction with the movies were just shovelware for all intents and purposes. And then there was the mobile game a few years back, which was so just insidious in the way it was built to try and coax people to spend money on it, especially given that it was aimed at kids. It was actually really gross when that thing was, and that's like totally separate from the person who that license is benefiting. Just as a product in and of itself, that thing was gross. Which is another reason I wouldn't purchase this. I don't trust Warner Brothers. I don't trust them not to make an absolute disaster microtransaction nightmare out of the thing. But anyway, slightly off topic. So this game has been in development actually since 2018, although it didn't get announced until this past fall, which you have to feel at least a little bit bad for the people involved in making this, because they've been working on this for some time already by the time J.K. Rowling published her essay, which, as a reminder, was, I believe, July of last year. So their game, though would not get announced for several months later, was already in development for some time. So that brings us to the more recent stuff that's gone on. There was a leak of information that went through a journalist named Jason Schreier. If you know games about or articles about the video game industry and some of its, let's go with less palatable practices, then you probably know his name. And he revealed that the way the player creation, character creation is being set up is in such a way to allow for basically doing some gender bending on your character creation. This is a game where you create a custom character to play through the story. So basically what they did was unbind certain gendered characteristics. So you have the ability to select whether your character is going to be a witch or a wizard, but for instance, that doesn't lock you into only specific, for example, voice acting. And you could choose to be a witch with a masculine voice or a wizard with a feminine voice, and those sorts of basically removing restrictions. Because usually on character creations, once you decide a certain body type, it limits a whole bunch of other options that you're allowed to have, body type or gender. In this case, they're unbinding some of those so that you can mix and match and actually create something that is more akin to a trans person or a gender fluid, sort of gender bendy person. There isn't really a proper non-binary option, but definitely a lot more wiggle room to mess around with that and create something that for a trans player may help them approximate themselves better than if those options were as restricted as they usually historically have been in these kinds of games. Now, there's a couple of things that I find interesting about this. And the first is, if I can be completely honest, this is and should be the bare minimum level of inclusion for trans people in games. I'm not saying this has no meaning or no value, but this is literally the least they could do. Because there's no character in the game, no scripted character who is trans, so far as we are aware, and there's no indication that that would be the case. I can't imagine they would hide that and leak this other part. As far as the leaking, I'll come back to that. But just removing restrictions and allowing a character creator the freedom to make something that is not a binary male or female character, that honestly should go without saying if there is a character creation option. And I'm not just saying like if you can choose a character. Some things will have very clearly scripted characters and you can choose this one or this one, not uncommonly male or female. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about if you're giving us a character creator. If you're saying, here, make the character how you want, then the least that you could do is unbind these options so that we can truly make whoever we want with whatever mix of gendered characteristics we wish them to have. Again, not without value, not worthless, but the literal bare minimum. There actually is very little effort to do this. It's actually more effort to prevent this because you have to put those restrictions in place in terms of locking out certain voice or body type options once someone chooses male or female, instead of just allowing them access to everything. But there's a couple of things that I want to talk about with the leaking of this. The timing of it is kind of interesting because the association with J.K. Rowling and the publication of her transphobic views, that is not up for debate. If you tell me in the comments that you don't think she's transphobic because she says she likes trans people, I am going to block you off being able to comment on my channel in the future. Do you also believe people who say I'm not racist but and then proceed to say something horribly racist? Are you really going to take the word of the person who's being accused of transphobia that they're not transphobic over the voices of trans people who are saying, yes, you frickin' are? Anyway, so even following on from that, they've had more recent issues because the lead designer, a gentleman by the name of Troy Levitt, some old YouTube videos from him have resurfaced, is sort of the best way that I can think to say it, because they are videos in which he, amongst other things, backs Gamergate and complains about SJW wokeness, which is concerning. And it's particularly concerning in regards to fans of the Harry Potter franchise, because part of the reason the whole issue with J.K. Rowling has been such a problem for this fandom is, by and large, demographically speaking, this fandom is liberal-leaning and tends to be more supportive of LGBTQ plus people in terms of broad demographics. Like if somebody who was well known to have more conservative views came out as transphobic, that probably wouldn't cause a massive issue within the fandom of that creator, because even if it wasn't assumed that that person was transphobic, it certainly wasn't assumed that they would have been an ally. There was an assumption of allyship from J.K. Rowling, which ultimately turned out to be a very false assumption. And that's sort of where the sense of betrayal came in with her. So this is an audience and a demographic and a fan base. And I brought this up when I talked about Amber Heard, because I compared the fact that she is at present still on Aquaman 2 to the releasing of Johnny Depp from Fantastic Beasts 3, the fan base for Harry Potter is going to care more about this kind of issue. Just, again, demographically speaking. And it's possible that Troy Levitt's views, especially as someone who spoke out in favor of Gamergate and what a misogynistic hate mob that was, when you've got a fandom with this high percentage of female fans, that's an issue. That's a problem. Now, this is not me saying that he should be fired. This is not me saying he should be canceled. There's no indication that that's going to happen. But that ends up being one more PR issue. Now, to be fair, the videos that are up are around about 3 years old, and there don't seem to be a lot of public statements from him, at least that have been found as yet, where he reinforces that these things he still believes. That being said, the fact that they were never taken down, to me, feels like an indication that he has not had a serious change of heart. It may indicate a softening or at least a desire to no longer speak publicly about those things, but I would have a hard time giving the benefit of the doubt that maybe his views are now significantly changed if he just left those videos up to be seen and found and be representative of him. So anyway, as I said, the timing felt suspicious because there was the already loaded issue of just the Harry Potter name and its association with J.K. Rowling, which Warner Brothers has been trying to distance itself from in numerous ways. I'll also come back to that. But you've got that initially, and then Troy Levitt doesn't help. And then about a week after stuff with him started hitting headlines, the leak about the ability to create trans characters in the character creator comes out. I was honestly suspicious of it. It felt like a PR move, and part of me really did think, and I even tweeted about it at the time, that this felt like damage control. This felt like the kind of decision that would have been made from somebody who knew that the thing was in the game, was looking at the bad press, realized that this might conceivably help, but that it would look bad if it was a formal press release, because then it would be clear that it was just being put out into the public sphere because they needed it for damage control. I'm less inclined to think that now, even though I did initially. For a couple of also, let me be clear, at no point, even when I was being slightly conspiratorial about it, at no point did I believe that it was put into the game as a PR measure. It's in the game because the people making the game, or at least certain elements of the game, wanted it there. I think I had just been suspicious that the leak of the information about it might have been more targeted and with more intent. The thing is, though, if they were going to leak it, they wouldn't do it through Jason Schreier, because AAA video game publishers hate Jason Schreier because he is one of the people most consistently and vehemently writing about their abuses when it comes to the work environments and things like crunch and hostile workplaces and some really nasty practices. They hate him. If they wanted to leak this, they would not have leaked this through him. And I'm not conspiratorial enough to go down the path of, maybe that's why he's the perfect cover. He doesn't even know he's being used. I'm like, he's been writing about this for too dang long. He knows how to vet a source. I think he would have sniffed that if they tried it. And I think they knew he would have sniffed that if they were going to try it, which is why at this point, I don't think it was a deliberate PR move. That being said, while it may not have been a PR move from the people at the top, I do find myself wondering about the motivations for the leak at all and the timing of the leak from whatever anonymous individuals leaked the information. And I have no reason to doubt the information. And I also find it interesting to start to think about how many people on the team actually would have known this. Because as I said, there's almost nothing that would have to be built for this to be an option. as I said, there's no flat out non-binary option. If there was, and like say they, them pronouns were an option, that would have been, so many people would have had to know, because they would have had to have voice actors record that. The writers would have known, the people lining up the voice stuff in the code with the models, like they would have known, everybody would have known. But whoever's working on the character builder, honestly, they could have done this completely on their own without approval. It's actually not uncommon in video game development, because you have so many either individuals or small teams working in isolation on specific parts. It's not uncommon, if they have the time and aren't under crunch, for them to basically kind of fiddle with something and make what they think is cool. And then when it eventually gets reviewed, they'll get to find out whether they get to keep it or not. So that possibility did enter my head, that this might not even have been something signed off from people like Troy Levitt or the people at the top. This might have just been something that the character creation team, or even certain individuals within the character creation team, might have decided on their own. We can do this with the existing assets. We do not need to build anything new for this. We just have to fiddle with code and unbind a few things. And then part of me wonders if a reason to leak it is so that once the public knows, it won't get cut. Because if it's leaked and then the game comes out next year and that's not the case, well, now Warner Brothers has to answer to the fact that there were more options in the character creation and they removed it. Once it's out in the public, they kind of have to keep it, because removing it and having that, if they had been able to mandate, hey, that thing you did in there, cut that, and it had all remained internal, well, nobody would have ever known. So it becomes a non-issue. It's a strictly internal issue. Whereas if that feature leaks and the game comes out and the feature's not there, oh, somebody said to cut that. And then that becomes a very loaded, very political act to do. And it's very clear that Warner Brothers is trying so hard to distance themselves from the politics of J.K. Rowling. When the game was first announced, and as I said, it was announced after J.K. Rowling wrote her essay in July, they put out stuff, official press release stuff, distancing themselves not only from her political views, but from her completely, basically saying she is not directly involved in this game in any way, shape, or form. So it's very clear that they are aware of the problems around J.K. Rowling right now, especially with how divided her fan base is. However, this is where I have to circle back to what has become the recurring subject of this channel lately, which is separating the artist from the art. What Warner Brothers wants, and what honestly the developers as well want us to get in our heads, is that this is not J.K. Rowling's game. They want a disassociation from her. They don't want us to think about her when we buy it. But even if she is not creatively involved, any purchase of this is still going to benefit her. Not only financially, and we can't know the details of that because, well, they generally aren't disclosed. It's possible she was paid a lump sum for the creation of the thing. It's possible she'll get a royalty on a per purchase basis. But even if she wasn't going to make a cent, even if there was a deal in place where she didn't make a penny off of sales, which is absolutely not the case. There's zero chance that's the case. But hypothetically, even if that was the case, I would still never pay money for this. Because the reality in the situation specific to J.K. Rowling, and I will reemphasize, these situations are always case by case, but with J.K. Rowling specifically, anything that bolsters the profile of Harry Potter as a property benefits her because it keeps her having a public platform, voice, and influence. And it is that platform, voice, and influence that she has decided to wield against trans people. I thought about wearing some of my Slytherin gear for this, and I'm not doing it. I'm wearing one item, which actually might not even be showing up properly on the camera. But this, which I might even have tilted wrong way, but this is the Deathly Hallows redone as a trans symbol. And I wore this because I think specifically it would piss her off. Not that she knows who I am. But I won't put on my actual Slytherin gear, not even the unofficial stuff, because it bolsters the profile of the property, and that bolsters the influence that she is wielding against people like me. And as much as Warner Brothers and the individual developers want to distance themselves from that, they can't. They cannot remove that from the equation. And I feel really bad for these developers. It's very clear that some of them, who knows how many, but some of them have serious issues and a lot of discomfort about her views. And I'm not going to judge them for continuing to work on this. They got this job before her views were clearly known and irrefutable. But the ground level developers also aren't going to make residuals. Their names are not going to be bolstered or lowered by the success or failure of this game. The only names that will get a boost on whether or not this game is purchased and successful are the franchise name of Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling. Her name is inextricably tied to Harry Potter, legally, financially, and by influence. So for as many other people are as involved in the franchise at this point, all the actors at this point, video game developers, no matter how they feel about who she is and what she is doing, their work contributes to her ability to keep doing it. And again, that's not necessarily a judgment call on those individuals. That's just the reality. I'm not going to judge the people who choose to buy and play this game. I'm not. I only ask that you not do the cliche of saying, well, she wasn't involved, separate the artist from the art, it doesn't matter. No, it does. It does. It matters. Everything that bolsters the profile of Harry Potter bolsters her ability to keep hurting people, which is something she's actively doing every time she speaks out about trans issues. And at this point, it is immensely clear that she is not going to stop doing that. So while I have utter sympathy for the developers who did this, and however far up the chain that goes, maybe someone like Troy Levitt did know and did sign off of it, in which case, good for him. I have sympathy. I appreciate the work that you're doing. But you can't remove her from this property. As long as she continues to speak about trans issues, as long as she uses the fame and the fact that she is the Harry Potter creator as a way to bolster a harmful and hurtful voice far louder than it should ever be bolstered, then supporting that franchise empowers her ability to do that. These things are messy. And I get that the developers want to be judged on their work. And I trust that many people will judge just their work and not delve into this association beyond maybe a footnote in a review. But many won't even do that, because that'll be seen as bringing politics in it. But because the influence of Harry Potter is what empowers J.K. Rowling to do what she's doing, you can't extricate the politics of that from a product that financially and influentially benefits her. Which sucks. That is the concluding note I almost always end on with these kinds of videos. This all just sucks. And I feel bad for anyone who's wrapped up in it, either because of their job and what they're working on, like with these developers, or fans who are in emotional turmoil every time this stuff comes back around. It sucks for everybody. But as much as I take issue with the argument of separate the artist from the art from a purely philosophical standpoint, I'll absolutely draw a line in the sand when it comes to J.K. Rowling in particular. Because it's not about something she did. It's about something she is now and continues to actively be doing. So it's not just a question of whether or not it shows your support for her beliefs. Even if you believe the absolute opposite of her, anything you do that bolsters her influence or her finances empowers her to keep doing what she's doing. Because it is an ongoing thing at this point. It's not a one-off. It's not an incident. It's not a thing that happened. It's a thing that is still happening and will continue to happen for as long as she's capable of doing it. Which fucking sucks. So, Hogwarts Legacy and the ability to sort of gender blend your player character, and ultimately a ramble about this particular franchise is tied to its creator. And again, I do want to stress, this is kind of specific to Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling, because this is an ongoing thing. This is something she continues to do. So unlike other situations, like, say, Joss Whedon, Gina Carano, Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, innumerable others, where it's a question of, are we going to punish them for something they did? And that is a debate to be had. That's not even the question with anything tied to Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling. The question here is, are we going to keep empowering her to continue to do it? People will make their own calls on that. Whatever your thoughts are in regards to this, as long as it isn't trying to argue with me and try and tell me that J.K. Rowling is not in fact transphobic, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. I have a Patreon. If you like what I do, this is in fact my living. It is how I pay my bills. It's also my birthday this month, so that'd be a nice present. But you don't have to. Like, share, subscribe. They help me out as well. And they would be greatly appreciated. But you don't have to do any of it. At the end of the day, you are the council, and I'm only running the meetings. Until next time, this council is adjourned.